58 BCE, where modern-day France is, the Gauls engaged in a great conflict against the Romans' influence under the command of Gallic general Vercingetorix to gain independence. This is one of the few times anyone ever revolted against the Romans, showing others that they could also attempt to revolt. This eventually led to the downfall of the Romans, however led to Gallia being forced to become Roman. Rome is a growing nation under the rule of Gaius Julius Caesar, and the empire is expanding under his rule as the consul. One of the places Caesar wants to expand into is Gallia, otherwise known as Celtica. This is the area north of the Pyrenees and what is known to us as modern-day France and Spain. The Gallia region is run by many small local tribes and often engage in conflict against one another. Julius Caesar beat the chiefs in this area a first time, including the leader of the Arverni, Celtulus. Julius then subjects the Gallic state to Roman rule, but many of the leaders and people of Gallia, however, are not in favor of Caesar's rule. Due to this disliking of Rome, the village elders sprung a plan to remove the Romans and continue their own rule. Romans were starting to settle in and take control of the area, trying to ensure that the Gauls would follow Caesar's rule. This meant there were many nobles and military companies moving into the North Pyrenees to hold the Gauls to their rule. Gallic councils were having meetings as to how they could regain their independence, ridding Gallia of Caesar's rule. They needed a leader to unite the tribes, and the elders of the council decided upon Vercingetorix, the son of Celtulus, the former leader of the Arverni. He was decided upon as the most capable leader to unite all of the tribes, as he already had military experience and noble lineage. Vercingetorix then traveled around with this company of Arverni to unite the Gallic and Celtic tribes. One of these tribes was the Aedui, who had been a longtime rival and enemy of the Arverni. The tribe killed off the Roman settlers in the area and prepared raids on the nearby Roman settlements. During these raids, any Romans in the area were slaughtered, leaving some high-level nobles to be murdered. After the retaliations from the newly united tribes, Caesar decided he needed to fight back and show that he was the ruler of Gallia, so he planned an attack. Vercingetorix was preparing for this, however, and started planning his defense against the consul.
Caesar was planning his attack as a sort of divide-and-conquer strategy, and split a part of his army into 3 small battalions led by him and 2 of his military advisors, or when Caesar wasn't there, they were led by Titus Labienus, Caesar's second-in-command. He had to cross the Allier River to get there, and started preparing to attack over bridges, but the Gauls cut the bridges down. Because of this, the Romans prepared their own bridges as a means of crossing. Before the Gallic War, the Celts and Gauls ruled over themselves, and even after Rome took over, they kept much of their own culture and rights. The battles to follow would end up changing and shaping the landscape, and ways of France and Spain for centuries to come. First, Caesar chose to go on strategic attacks to take over certain Gallic points in the area. This included the Briturges, in which they fought along the defenders' wall, trying to build a ramp where the Gauls rained down hot oil and arrows on the attackers. The Romans, however, had so many builders that every time one was killed, they were replaced, and the Romans finally took the city, and a strategic point on the outside of Gallic territory. This fight provided much information about what the Romans were capable of, and what they were planning to do to the tribes. They proved to the Gauls that they were indeed a force to be reckoned with. Caesar's army eventually went on the offensive, with many more soldiers than Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix, however, had a great plan for defense, and it was one of the first times this strategy had been used in history. Scorched Earth. Scorched Earth includes a retreat where the defenders will burn down all of their towns and farms in order to attempt to starve out the attackers while they have to make ground over long distances. Vercingetorix and the Gauls burnt down all but 3 of their cities, where all their people went to stay and live during this defense. 2 of these cities were in very defensible positions, and the other was Vercingetorix's hometown. Caesar, however, made a lot of ground, and eventually made it to the Gauls with plenty of soldiers to fight. The Gauls threw all of their supplies deep into a nearby forest to hide it from the attackers. The defense, however, was futile, and the Romans burst through the Gallic line.
Vercingetorix gave himself over as a prisoner to Rome to save his people, as Rome imposed their rule but let the people stay. Vercingetorix was kept for a couple years as a prisoner, but when Rome's wars were over, they paraded him through the streets and had him executed. Caesar made Gallia and Celtica parts of Rome, and the people were to learn Latin and be Romans under the empire. In short term, it meant these people were to change and not partake in their own pre-established culture. The long-term impact of this event is that as Gallia became a part of Rome, the people had to learn Latin. However, since these people were so far from the heart of Rome, their spoken Latin became vulgar and over time developed into the language today known as French. This also influenced Catholic spread to the area as it was the religion of Rome and its people.
After centuries of tribal independence, Vercingetorix had tried to unite the Gauls against a common enemy, but it was too little, too late.
Was this a tragic day for the Celts?
It was definitely a tragic day for all the tribes which were involved in this battle. If we consider that these people were all Celts, it was certainly a very important day for all these people.
And if there'd been a different outcome, do you think we'd have a different Europe today?
I think it's very clear from our modern point of view that history would have turned to a completely different story if this battle hadn't taken place.
If the Gauls had won, who knows what a Celtic Europe would have looked like? 2,000 years on, the romantic myth of what might have been still has a powerful hold over the French nation. Military monuments are nothing unusual, but this statue's different because Vercingetorix lost. It's here because it's become a symbol of the French nation. And the first person to articulate this idea about Vercingetorix was the very man who defeated him, Julius Caesar. He said that if all the Gaulish tribes could unite, they could defy the universe. Quite a thought, especially if you're a Frenchman.
Vercingetorix was a great commander, hindered only by the fact that Gallia wasn't united. His tactics were almost, if not as good as Julius Caesar's, but due to the split of the Gallic tribes, they were unable to push back Caesar's iron fist. This conflict was very serious and led to the downfall of a very strong and independent people. The Romans left very little compromise between the two sides as the Gauls were indicted into the Roman life.